So what we're talking about today is virtual interview hacks. Virtual interviewing is not something that's new. It's just becoming a lot more common, obviously, because the world that we live in right now. It is very common pre-COVID to have participated in a virtual interview as a part of a first round or even a second round interview process. So we'll be going over some of the things that will be helpful for you in setting up for a virtual interview, for practicing, and then how you might think about approaching the interview process as a whole. So I tend to be a pretty informal presenter. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask them if I don't see them in the chat. And I think Logan and or Justin, you'll probably help me monitor if that's okay. Sometimes I can't see the chat on my on my one screen over here. So let's go ahead and get started. For those of you who love agendas, this is what we're going to be talking about, things to think about before the interview, how you can set the scene for success in a virtual interview, everything from dressing the part to realizing that you are human and human error is a part of the world and a part of the job search process as well, and how to avoid pitfalls in the job search process. One thing I do want to emphasize at the very beginning of this is that interviews are about fit. And so if and when you get to the process where you have gotten the point in the process where you have gotten an interview, I would really like for you to congratulate yourself because not everybody gets an interview. So that's always good to remember that at some point they have picked you out of a pool of people and said, I like this person on paper. I like that their skills and qualifications. So yes, you still have a little bit to go before you get the opportunity, but an interview is an absolute awesome step in the right direction. So they are about fit. It's an opportunity for them to get to know you beyond your skill set or beyond what you've put on paper. So don't be afraid to also let your personality come through in this process. So you do want to make sure that you note that the same rules apply for an interview. You still want to prepare, you still want to dress professionally, you still want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. But also remember with virtual interviews, there are some extra rules added in, and I'll go over what those are, what those can be. So some things to think about before the interview. You do want to make sure that you clarify the medium and the time zone. So you don't want to be prepping for a virtual interview and then end up being actually over the phone. And then time zone is essentially important just because you don't want to miss something just because you didn't know what time zone it is. And so always make sure you clarify at least those two. If at all possible, make sure you do a test run. So if you are, we're all working in Zoom at VCU, but maybe you're using GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting or something completely different. So if you get the opportunity to download the software and practice, absolutely do that. If you are running on a laptop, check your battery level. Make sure you've got an outlet that's close to you and test if you can test or do a run through in the place where you will be for your interview process, because you never would know what might be different for bandwidth, for noises, for things like that. And if you can check the same time that you're going to be, or do a test run at the same time that you're going to be doing your interview. So if you do your test run at 5 o'clock, but an 11 o'clock train runs right by your apartment on Thursdays, then it's not helpful to do that. So make sure you do a test run as close to the actual time of the interview as you can. For phone interviews, I put this in here just because some phone interviews still happen. I would definitely suggest not using speakerphone just because you never know what noises are going to pick up along the way. I had a very old smartphone and it did not pick up my own voice very well, let alone any other outside distractions. So be mindful of that also. You probably saw me at the beginning of this session playing with my lighting. I've got this lamp over here that sometimes makes me look like Snow White and sometimes just makes me look washed out. So check your lighting to make sure that the space that you are in, you're going to be able to be seen. The ideal is you want your lighting to come from or to be shining on you and not from behind you or from the side. So you're a little bit more clearly seen if you've got that light, maybe that's behind your computer monitor or on either side in front of you. If at all possible, try to make sure your camera is at eye level, so that way you're looking directly into the screen. I know if you're using Zoom, I highly recommend using speaker view. So if you can right now, well, it's probably different because I'm sharing my screen, but next time you talk to someone via Zoom, there is the little view button up in the top right corner of your screen, and you can change it to either speaker or gallery. Speaker view is really helpful because it puts a little image of you right up at the top of the screen, and then the rest of the screen is the person you're talking to. So if you are like me and tend to, in meetings, look at yourself more than you might look at the other people, that helps you still look in the right direction rather than down here where you might be, or down here where somebody else might be. So keep your camera at eye level, and if you're in Zoom, then use that speaker view. The definition of early for virtual interviews is a lot different than it is for in-person interviews. So you want to make sure that you're prompt, but not too early. So early for virtual interviews, kind of an acceptable early timing, I would say would probably be 2 to 3 minutes before your interview starts. And that's a lot different because if you were in person, I would say 10 to 15 minutes early. But if you are hanging out in the waiting room in an interviewer is interviewing somebody else, it might be a distraction to them, or they might actually let you in on accident and you could see somebody else's interview. So 2 to 3 minutes is early enough for a virtual interview. And then it's always, always a good idea to have a backup plan. So you never know when Wi-Fi is going to go out. I think some people are struggling with it this morning at VCU, but have a backup plan. So know who you can call or who you can email if something happens with your computer, with the software, or anything like that. And then I like to think about virtual interviews like open book tests. So you can have whatever you want in front of you. What you don't want to be doing is reading from papers that are in front of you. So what I recommend having out in front of you is at least your CV or your resume, copy of the job description, and then something to write on. So that way, if you need to pause and think about an answer for a second, you can have something to write notes down on. You could highlight specific sections of your CV that you want to make sure that you know, and nobody's going to see it. It's okay. If you are someone who likes positive affirmations or needs keywords to remind you, then use the sticky note method and put sticky notes all around your computer screen. Just make sure they don't cover up that webcam. So use whatever you need to do to jog your memory about things that you want to share, stories, skills, experiences, to make sure you're giving the best interview answer possible. It's always a good idea to be aware of other distractions. So that 11 o'clock train that comes through, see if you can push your interview back to 11:30 if that needs to happen. And then I'm guilty of this a lot, forgetting to close other computer programs that might make noise. So I have a little ding that comes through every time I get a new email. So every time I do a workshop like this, I have to remember to close my email inbox. So make sure that you are aware of all those notifications that could come through on your computer. And then noise levels on your end, if you can monitor them, cool. If you've got noisy roommates, families, pets, see what you can do to isolate them in a different part of your space. Or if you need to find a quiet place to go for an interview, go and try and find that. But do what you can to monitor the noise levels on your end. And then if you're not comfortable showing off your space, if you don't have a blank wall or something that you'd be comfortable showing off, then look into virtual backgrounds. I really like some of the plain kind of corporate style ones that Canva offers. I know VCU has some preloaded ones on Zoom. So look into those as well. As long as it's nothing that is distracting and somebody's going to be paying more attention to your virtual background than they are to what you're saying, then it should be fine. So I know Canva has some fun ones where it's like a beach scene and the palm trees move. Like I would be distracted by the palm trees. So don't go that one, do a static one. And then dressing the part. So you still want to make sure that you're dressing up top to bottom for a virtual interview, not just the top half. So for interviews, you still want to go into, you want to dress in a suit or a dressy business casual at least. So you would have, either a cardigan or a sweater or a suit jacket over. So that would be good. And then for the rule of 5, that applies to folks who wear jewelry. So what it means is no more than 5 pieces of jewelry at any one time, and each earring counts as one. So I've got 2 earrings, I've got a necklace, and I've got 2 rings. So I would probably take at least one piece off and probably just take off my necklace, so I'm not sitting here distracting by it. You want people focused on what you're saying, not necessarily what you're wearing. So if it's something too distracting, then make sure you try to pare it down a little bit. And I think the best piece of advice is try sitting in your outfit, because no matter if you were in person or virtual, you're going to be sitting in this outfit for a while. Are you comfortable, or are you going to be, distracted by trying to move and, pull things around so you can be more comfortable the whole time? So that would be my advice on dressing for interviews. Now, when you get into the interview space, it's always a good idea to look at the interviewer and not at yourself. So that's why I recommended using that speaker view in Zoom, because that will help you avoid looking off to the side, and then making sure your camera is at eye level as well. One thing that I've noticed also in the process of having a lot of meetings on Zoom is to be mindful of short confirmation words. So if you are someone who, to show that you're listening, likes to go, yeah, that will mess up the audio on a Zoom conversation. So you do your best to either mute yourself if you know that you're going to do that, or just refrain from doing those short confirmation words, so that way you don't switch it and then you don't hear what the interviewer is saying. So on that same lens, make sure you let the interviewer finish speaking before you start giving your answers. I know sometimes you're like, yes, they asked me the question that I wanted to be asked. I have the most amazing answer. Just stop talking so I can start talking. Let them finish speaking, because they might take the question in a completely different way. So give them that chance to do that. And then also on your end, make sure you have a definitive end to your answer. Because I know even in person, sometimes if somebody just kind of goes on and just kind of trails their answer off, in person, it's hard to react to that. But if your audio is being a little weird on Zoom or on another virtual platform, then that can be tricky, and they might not know when to start as easily as if you just finished. And then also make sure you speak clearly and project your voice. So I always struggle with this because I'm kind of a quiet person. So even when I am talking like this, sometimes I feel like I'm shouting, but I do want to make sure that I am heard. And you never know what the audio situation is like on the other end of the screen. So make sure that you are speaking clearly and projecting so that they can understand what you're saying. Okay, so the interview process is inherently awkward. I will just own that up front. If something happens, if a pet walks across the screen, or your roommate opens the door and asks if you want pizza, acknowledge the situation. Just say, "Oh, sorry, my roommate came in. I told him we were interviewing. It won't happen again." Just explain that it happened. I have been in the process of conducting an interview with a candidate, and her boss walked in. This person's boss knew that they were interviewing, but just forgot and went to ask her a question. So they were horrified. We ended up hiring her because she was great, but own up to any situations, just explain it, and realize that interviewers are human too. They may be nervous about this process, or they may have, kids or pets or coworkers that, interfere with what's going on. So be mindful of that. And then be mindful of nonverbals also. So it's a little bit more tricky in Zoom to gauge kind of what people are thinking by looking at their nonverbals, because you're not physically in the same space as them. So you're find that you're going to have to pay a little bit more close attention. So if you feel like you're talking for a long time and you see people kind of looking off into the distance or looking down at their watch, that might be a good sign to wrap up your answer. And then be mindful of your nonverbals also. So make sure you're, staring straight ahead at the camera so that you're giving it your full attention. It's also helpful if your legs are pointed towards the camera, because you tend to kind of point your face wherever you point your legs when you're sitting. And then also, this is a way that you can show that you're excited and enthusiastic about this role. If you are not the most excited, smiley person in the world, that's okay. You don't have to roll into the interview and say, "Hey, I'm so excited to be here." That would be creepy. Don't do that. But through nonverbals, through paying attention, through active listening, you can show that you're interested and attentive and enthusiastic about the role. Okay, so some general interview preparation. It's a good idea to do your research before you get to the interview process. You really want to do it before you apply, but it's a good idea to revisit that research that you've done before you get to the interview process. So things that you want to make sure you dive a little deeper into are the employer. An easy way to do that is to look up their website, look up, maybe what is their strategic plan, what's their vision for their organization. You could see some organizations will post organizational charts so that you can see how their staff is structured, and where people tend to go or where career paths might be moving up. You do want to make sure that you refamiliarize yourself with your abilities and your skills and your experiences. An easy way to do that is just to read through any documents you submitted to that opportunity. So if it's a CV or a resume, just read through. And one really easy way to make sure that you're prepared for any kind of situational questions that might come up in an interview is to have a story for everything on your document. So everything on your document is fair game for questions for interviews. So what would you say if you were asked about this rotation? Or what would you say if you were asked about this research experience? What would you tell? Why is it on your document? Why is it important for it to be there? So having stories can really help. I did mention that you could have notes and have papers all around your computer to help jog your memory. You don't want to rely on it, so you still want to make sure that you have practiced sufficiently for an interview and that you have you can speak eloquently about your skills. And you always, always, always want to have questions for the interviewer. I have conducted interviews before for people, and at the end of the day, they don't have questions. And to me, it shows that, they didn't take the time to do their research, or they're just not interested. Maybe it's a surface level interest for them. And so I recommend when you're doing your research, try and figure out 5 to 10 questions and write them down on that piece of paper that you have right next to the computer. So that way, if they give you information about the organization as a part of the interview process, you can cross off a couple and still be left with some questions. So always have questions. It shows that you're actively engaged in listening and interested. Okay, I think I got ahead of myself. So a little bit more information about knowing yourself. All of these things are good to be aware of. So your academic background, performance, experience, special skills, activities, these probably look like sections of a resume. Yes. So again, reading through your resume or your CV would absolutely be good to do before an interview. And if you're not sure about how to talk about yourself or how to talk about your skills, it's a good idea to figure out what employers want. So how do you do that? NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and they have done a survey of employers to help define career readiness. And so these are general across all industries, not specific to any industry, but they've identified skills in new grads that they think are valuable for folks that they want to hire. So that's critical thinking and problem solving, oral and written communication, teamwork, digital technology, leadership, professionalism and work ethic, career management, and global and intercultural fluency. So if you're unsure about how to talk about your skills, these are easy places to start from. Do you have skills and are you confident in your oral and written communications or in your teamwork and collaboration? So those are good places to start also. And you most likely will also have competencies for your industry. So for example, I did a workshop similar to this for new pharmacy graduates, and I pulled kind of the competencies from one of their central organizations about what they expect new pharmacy graduates to be skilled in. And so you can see there are some technical things, some skills-based things, some educational-based things, but there are also some transferable skills. So leadership, quality management, professionalism, communication, problem solving, a lot of crossover with the NACE competencies that we just saw. So think if you're struggling with how to talk about your skills, figure out what's important for folks in your industry to have. And then you can, usually if you just Google your name or your program's name or your industry name and then competencies, you'll come up with something. And that will give you things to think about and say, okay, I'm good at that. I can focus some of my interview answers on that. So that can be helpful in brainstorming. And like I said, when you're knowing the employer, these are all good things to look at. So their missions, values, organizational structure. Maybe if you're going into industry, who's their competition? You can see what they're in the news for about, whether it's good or bad, things like that. And then where are they located? So all of those things are good to know when you're researching an employer. And then you absolutely want to make sure that you save the job posting. So when you apply for a job is open for a certain period of time. After that period of time ends, so the closing date, the job posting goes away and you no longer have it. So make sure you print it, save it as a PDF, copy and paste, whatever you need to do to have it. So that way, you have that as a cheat sheet during the interview process because they've told you what they want exactly in there. I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea about types of questions that you could take a look at. So again, these probably look like sections of your resume or your CV. So all of these are fair game for interview questions. And then we have a link here that goes to a common interview questions section of our website. So if you're looking for sample questions to run through, those are good ones to pull from as well. We also have, and I'll show you this a little bit later, but we also have a resource in Handshake called Interview Stream. And that is a virtual interviewing platform where you can record yourself on your webcam answering interview questions and play it back. Nobody sees the videos except for you, unless you share them with someone. But it's a great way to practice in that exact format that you're going to be interviewing in. So highly recommend Interview Stream. So some of the questions I get about how to answer interview questions relate to situational based questions. And so the best way to kind of formulate your response to those questions, and what do I mean by situational based questions are those ones that start with, tell me about a time when, or, what did you do in this situation? So tell me about a time that you encountered a difficult problem, or you had to work with a difficult person, or you had to work in a team. So what an employer is looking for in that situation is a story. And so this technique, the Stark technique, helps you formulate a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so how you might address this is, say, for example, an interviewer asks you, tell me about a time when you experienced a conflict while working on a team. So you might say, before you knew about the Stark technique, you might say, I worked with a team on writing an article. One of my teammates wasn't completing their section, so we divided up the work. Good interview answer? I can't see you, so probably I'm going to assume that you say no. Correct. The answer is no. That's not a great interview answer. So if you're using the Stark technique, the way that you might answer that question, and I've color coded it here. So the situation is in the lab. We worked in a team to get a paper published. The task that you had to address was one teammate wasn't doing their part. The action that you needed to take, or the action that you took, was you pulled that person aside, you talked to them about what they actually wanted to do, or if there's something they would rather do. The result is that they resolve the situation by reassigning team member tasks. And then the knowledge that they learned was to start any group project with, asking people who they would like or what they would like to work on, rather than just assigning tasks. So this is definitely a more full and complete answer than the previous one. One thing I also want to mention is when you are talking about situations where you worked in a team, it's very easy to say, we did this, we did this, we did this, but we are not interviewing. You are interviewing. So make sure you talk about what you did. So you want to say, I did this, or I worked with this team member to do this, to show your action and your involvement in that situation. Okay, so when you are answering questions, just some general things that are helpful is to provide examples whenever you can. It helps paint a better picture, a more clear picture of your skill set. And everybody loves listening to stories, so that's fun to do. And then it's absolutely okay to take time to think. You may be stumped by an interview question and your brain might just completely go blank. When you get to an interview process, the interviewers want you to do well. They have invested time, money, energy, resources into getting you to this point. And they want to be able to choose from well-qualified candidates. So if you need to take 30 seconds to think of a good answer, take 30 seconds. You can say, wow, that's a really good question. Can I have 30 seconds to think about it? And then you've got your notepad that's right next to your computer. You can jot down some notes. You can take a quick glance over your CV or your resume to help you get an idea about what you might want to say for that answer. So it is absolutely okay to take time to think. What you don't want to do is make up something or lie about a situation. So make sure you're honest about a situation. If you still, after 30 seconds, can't think of something, you can say, I haven't experienced that, but here's what I would do. And then, sometimes you just can't think of an example, and that's okay, but you still want to talk through what they're asking you to talk through. And then again, make sure you're speaking clearly as you go through this so they can understand you. Some questions that people hate answering and questions that I love asking in mock interviews are, tell me about yourself and tell me about a weakness. So tell me about yourself. I would love for everybody to want to be asked this question because there is so much that you can do with it. You can talk about your motivation. You can talk about your drive. You can talk about why you're interested in that organization. You can bring up any random experience that relates that you want to make sure that they know about. So all of those things are good to talk about and tell me about yourself if you get that question. What you don't want to do is give them your full and complete life story. Well, I was born in North Carolina, and then when I was 2, we moved to Oklahoma. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for the you in terms of that job. So why are you interested in that role? And sometimes people will say, well, what if they ask me why this organization? I don't want to get ahead of myself. You have zero control over what questions are asked in an interview. So don't save answers that could be good for questions that you may not be asked. So I would like for you to hope to get asked that question. And then tell me about a weakness. This is one, nobody likes talking about weaknesses. And so the best way to answer this question is to talk about your weaknesses in a way that shows that you have either overcome them or are working on them. So for example, one of mine, a common one that people talk about is public speaking. So you could say, I wasn't really great at public speaking, but I signed up to shadow a lot of people. And then I became a little bit more confident in it. And I just made myself do it until I was no longer nervous. So that was my weakness, but now it's a strength. So that's a way to talk about a weakness, is to talk about how you are working on it or how you overcame it. In an interview process, you may run into sensitive questions. These are questions that you should not be asked in this form. Because they either invite bias or discrimination, or they're just not legal to be asked. And so sometimes, usually people will zero in on this one at the end. You have probably, if you filled out a job application in the US, you have been asked this question in a different format. You've probably been asked if you've been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor. So in this form, they should not be asking this. And then this, so do you have any disabilities or social organizations, marital status? That, again, that's just personal information that is not relevant to your ability to do the job. If you do get asked a question like this, you have a couple different ways for, if you want to address it or if you want to respond. You could, to the degree that you're comfortable with, you could answer the question if you'd like. You could also examine the intent of the question and respond accordingly. So for example, if somebody asked me, am I married? I might say, well, I think what you're asking is, am I available to work evenings and weekends? And I can tell you that I've got a flexible schedule. I've operated on that before. And, kind of figuring out what the intent is behind that question. Or you could say, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable answering that question. I don't see how it relates to my ability to do this job. So this doesn't happen very often, but I always like to talk about it in interview situations so you are prepared in case it does happen. It may be that this person, the interviewer, this is their first time doing an interview and they're just trying to make conversation. Or, maybe they're someone who just doesn't like to follow the rules. So to the degree that you're comfortable, pick how you want to respond or not respond to those types of questions. With virtual interviews, I find that, or with being virtual in general, I find that it's very easy to be casual, because you're most likely in your school space, in your home space. So make sure you're keeping that level of professionalism up, especially in an interview process, and do what you need to keep that energy level up too. So it may be the end of the day, maybe 6 o'clock, I don't know what time it is. Maybe you're tired, maybe you just got out of class or clinics or rotations. But do what you need to do to get your energy level up so you can be active and engaged in that process. And then finally, just some general interview tips. Make sure that you're preparing thoroughly. I talked about how you can study yourself, how you can study the employer, how you can anticipate questions, and how you can prepare your questions. And make sure you practice. Like I said, I'll show you interview stream in just a second so you know where to access it. It sounds silly, and I work on this with my toddler sometimes too, but take deep breaths. It can absolutely help recenter you if you are nervous, anxious in an interview process. It can, if you make it a habit to take a deep breath before you give your answer, then I find that you give a more well thought out answer because you're not rushing and tripping over your words to try and just get an answer out quickly. Uh, I find also that anxiety levels go down the more involved you feel in the interview. So if you feel like they're just pelting you with questions, make sure that you have questions of your own, or if you say hi at the very beginning, ask them how their day is going, or, some of that small talk questions to kind of ease a little bit of the anxiety. So get involved to the extent that you're comfortable. And then I addressed this a little bit earlier, but realize that interviewers are human too. And sometimes they just make mistakes. Sometimes they're nervous, or sometimes they've had bad days. So we're all human here. We're all people trying to operate in a virtual world that isn't really virtual or doesn't lend itself to being virtual very well. And then it's always a good idea to be aware of your problem areas in case you are asked them. I mean, like I said, being asked that weakness question is very common, but you want to make sure that you are aware enough to show that you can work on it. I think one of the things that I always try to look for in interviews is that emotional intelligence and self-awareness. So are you mature enough to talk about your skills in a positive way and your weaknesses in a positive way as well? And then chances are this isn't the first time you've ever interviewed. So think about what has worked for you in the past and how you can use that moving forward. Okay. I have just talked a lot at you, so I would love to take any questions that we have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat if anything came through there. Okay, let me do one more thing before we let y'all go. I'm going to show you Handshake, and then I will absolutely stay on for questions. I know we said, I might have finished a little bit early, but let me show you Handshake real quick. Please hang tight with me while I log into my student account. The way you access Handshake actually is through the Career Center website. So it's careers.vcu.edu, and you can just click on Handshake right here. So I'm going to show you, sorry, this is the admin side, pretend you don't see it. So you're my student account. So you log in with your VCU ID and password. If you've never logged in before, it'll ask you some career related questions or career interest questions to figure out what types of things you might be interested in. You can skip those, you can answer them. All those do is those shape what shows up on your homepage. So completely up to you. But two things. First, interview stream. So if you're looking for resources, you can come over here to Career Center and then click on resources right here. And the interview stream is the second one down. So you click on interview stream, you click on it again. And it may look a little bit different again because I've got an admin account, but what you want to click on is conduct an interview and then take a custom interview. And so there are thousands of questions loaded into this question library. You can pick from the 15 most common, or you can search by topic or topic area or industry area. And then what you do is you get to pick which questions you want to be asked. So you click the little plus sign right next to a question, then you click start my interview. I'm not going to click that because I'm already using my webcam, but it will play a video of somebody asking you that question and then flip around and use your webcam to record you answering it. So highly recommend using Interview Stream. I think it's a wonderful resource. So let me hop back over to
Megan, how do you get feedback on how you answered the question?
So in Interview Stream, Interview Stream isn't set up to provide feedback. So if you would like feedback, I'd recommend scheduling a mock interview, and I can show you how to do that also. This is just a practice platform. You do have the ability within Interview Stream to share your video recordings out. So if you have someone that you want to send them to so that they can watch and send you feedback, you can do that too.
And there was a question, is it distracting to wear headphones during an interview?
I don't think so. I've been in meetings with people who are wearing headphones and I don't find it distracting. I think if you're worried about it being distracting, you can address it at the beginning and say, hey, sorry, I've got to wear these headphones. I've got external noise and this just helps. So no, I don't think anybody's going to judge you for wearing headphones.
Okay. And one last question. When we practice our responses and our comfort with certain questions, is there any specific amount of time that we should limit our responses to?
So that's also a wonderful thing about interview stream because it limits your response to 2 minutes. And 2 minutes is actually a very long time to talk. So I think between 30 seconds and 2 minutes is probably around where you want to stick. Um, it's different. I don't think anybody here is doing graduate school or medical school interviews, but just for job interviews, then around that time is good. So I do want to show you one more thing, and then I can absolutely stick around to take more questions, so keep them coming. But to make an appointment, if you would like to do a mock interview, again, you're going to log in a Handshake, come over here and click on Career Center, and then you'll be taken to this page. You can click on Appointments. Then you'd click Schedule a New Appointment, VCU Career Services, and then any of these MCV appointment types will be directed to my calendar or my colleague Sonia Barnes, and we work directly with students on the MCV campus. So it'll just show up with our availability. So if you want to do a mock interview, you'd click that. A mock interview is an hour-long time slot. Normally appointments are just 30 minutes, but mock interviews, we like to spend a little bit more time asking questions, giving feedback. What you can do is click through and see any of these highlighted ones will show up with our appointment times, and you can click through if any of those dates don't work. And then what you'll do is select the how you want to meet. So we can do phone call, video call, not an email for mock interview. That just don't work. That just doesn't work. And then it's helpful if you put in this box a little bit about the type of interview you're going for. So it's helpful if you can tell us maybe the job title or share a link to the job posting or send us your resume or CV ahead of time so we can shape the questions to be more specific to you and not just the general questions. So we do a little bit of preparation beforehand, before the mock interview to prepare questions that are going to be helpful for you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'd love any more questions that you have.
Megan, I'm going to unmute myself. Thanks for doing this.
Nice.
So I may have missed this. I had to step away for a call for a couple minutes, but one of the things that comes up sometimes is that, sorry, I'm actually going to show my video. One of the things that comes up sometimes is that students don't have an answer to a question entirely. So the things that I think of are questions like, tell me about an ethical dilemma you encountered, or tell me about a time when you didn't agree with a preceptor or a supervisor. And so I think thinking broadly about outside of just the work environment, right? Like you can talk about things that happen in school or, personal life, but if there's really no answer that the student can recall, do you have a recommendation for how to handle that?
That's when I would say, that's a good question. I can't think of an example, but here's how I would address it. So that way they can still get the process of, or kind of walk through the process that employer is looking for. Because really, it's cool if they have an example, that's what they're looking for. But at the end of the day, what they're looking for is how you would navigate that situation. So if you can walk through how you might do it, even if you haven't done it, then that can be helpful.